go. 5:30.
Yeah.
Might as well stay standing, right? I'll stay up.
Call the meeting to order. Please rise and join us. Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. May I please have an approval of the minutes of the meeting held January 9th, 2017?
Don't move.
Second.
Any discussion? Having a first and a second, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Bev, anybody wanting to? Okay. May I please have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved. Second. Which one was that?
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Dan, good news report.
Well, good evening. Middle school, right? Everybody loves that transitional time in life when students are making decisions, declaring their independence perhaps, and making choices about what classes they can take. Obviously, we have a strong core curriculum available to our middle school students, and then they also have encore classes, things that allow them to choose a little bit more information that is specific to their levels of interest and their areas of interest. Memorial Middle School is now offering additional enhancement opportunities before and after school in the school library. And as you know, our libraries are great hubs for learning, but there's a new buzz in the air, and we're going to have Memorial's librarian Laura Allard and teacher Todd Stieber come to tell us this evening about maker spaces. It's a word that's out there. It's kind of a buzzword, and so we'll invite them to tell us about what's going on at Memorial with maker spaces.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us here today. Last fall, we applied for a grant, a mini grant that was offered to all the school district libraries. That was part of a larger grant that was applied for by Ann Smith from the state, which was the Classroom Innovation Grant. So we were awarded some money from that grant, and with that money, we were able to purchase some tools that we are using in our Makerspace project. And basically, we purchased 3D printers, we purchased a plotter, we purchased some sewing machines, we purchased some Arduino kits, and some HDMI cameras. Am I right? No. DSLR cameras. I'm still learning. So we purchased all this great stuff, these tools for students to use in our makerspace. So to go into a little bit more detail, my colleague Todd Stieber is going to tell you a little bit about what happens in the makerspace.
So I get the job of elaborating a little bit on this. We started a tech club with Teen Tech Week about 3 years ago, which was just about a week long. And Laura and I reflected on that, thought, man, we could really expand on this a little bit further, because just 1 week with these kids wasn't enough. So we turned that into a whole year of a tech club. She approached me in the fall about this grant, and I said, this is a wonderful opportunity to bring some of this equipment that we've been talking about and teaching about, but actually bringing that in so the kids can have that physical, tangible product when they're done. Our kids go to our science classes, and it's a wonderful curriculum, but when they're exploring doing these experiments, they're not really experiments. There's a predictable outcome, a measurable level of success. And that's not the way the real world always works. And we want our kids to kind of go out and to explore this open-ended opportunity, this make something movement. There's a huge community around this, and just exploring with what they can develop when they have these tools to explore, engage. There's some pictures going around with our 3D printers. They're creating these wonderful little gadgets like cell phone holders that work in multiple different positions. So rather than just going out and buying something, they look at, oh, I really want my thing to look like this. And how can I design that? How can I make that truly mine? They've got an idea in their head, and now they've got this tool to where they can actually produce it and have something tangible at the end of it. It's the ultimate experiment. It might fail. They might go back, tweak it a little bit, recreate it, redesign it. But that's what we want our engineers to do, to explore, to push that edge, and just to really come up with something new. And we're really excited about bringing these into Memorial. I know I've started one over at Whittier Middle School as well, so hopefully we can grow this program and it can expand in all of the middle schools. Anything you want to add? All right.
How often do you guys meet?
We meet at Memorial Middle School in the mornings on Friday mornings and Monday mornings and after school on Mondays. So we're just growing. I'm the gifted and talented coordinator at Memorial, and I'm there 3 days a week. So whenever we have that opportunity where there's not something going on in the library, we try to pack the kids in before school or after school. And then we're expanding it also into the kids' directed studies periods. Middle school is one of those transition times where the kids are exploring with themselves and who they want to become. They've got all of these activities going on before and after school. We want to get those kids that don't have that time. So we're working on bringing it into the encore time with the directed studies kids and having them have access to the studio as well. We've also invited a couple of staff members at each building where they might have a hobby or some interest of their own, where they come in and we have a teacher give a sewing class or a beading class. What's this week? Crocheting. So just there's all kinds of ways for the staff to get involved with this, as well as other community members. We've got a parent who works out at the National Guard, and he's coming to volunteer his time now with computer programming and coding and sharing his experience, and he's helping out with that too. So just bringing in the community with this as well.
Do students just show up, or do they have to register?
Well, for our focus sessions where we've got a specific intent for that, we have them sign up because space is rather limited. We have 2 3D printers, 2 DSLR cameras, so we don't have enough to equip everybody with it, so we have them sign up. On all the other occasions, it's an open studio, so the kids come in and we instruct them right away from the beginning that you make with a purpose. So if you've got an idea in your head, you come down and we can teach you how to use the equipment, but we're not going to show you what to do. So if they've got a passion inside or they've got an idea that they want to explore and implement, come on down and we'll show you what the next step is, how to produce something. But we're not going to sit and tell them what to do.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, there's a similar program at Patrick Henry, and my son has participated in that on several occasions and really enjoys it. So he always tries to get his name on the list as soon as he can.
Yeah, it's a popular.
It's becoming very popular.
I think we've served about 46 individual, unique students. Some come and go depending on what's going on. But it's, we've only been doing it since Q2, so about 3 months now. And it's been steadily growing, and we're looking on bringing more staff members in for it and getting some more equipment. So we'll keep an eye out for a grant or something down the road. I know at the elementary level, they've got maker spaces too, where they explore with some rudimentary coding and little robots, and this is just that next step. So they've got that basic knowledge of coding and how input equals output, but they don't really produce anything. So here's that next logical progression. How do you take those skills and actually produce something with it?
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deanne. Do we have any conflicts of interest? No conflicts? May I please have a motion for the approval of the consent agenda?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Down to claims to Sanford, the supplemental consent agenda. May I please have a motion?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes with an abstention from Board Member Ryder. Now I need approval on the supplement consent agenda claims to Avera.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion passes with abstention from Board Member Parker. Now on to you, sir.
Okay, well, the first topic we have tonight under the reports of the superintendent is to give you an update on the strategic plan. What I want to tell you tonight is we've taken the information from the last work session. We've put together that document that you've received. We're very close to having the finished document. As of this morning, we believe that we'll have that finished document the first week in February, so right around the corner here. But beyond that, we think it's important that everybody knows that this is a work in progress. It's something that will be ongoing, and in order to demonstrate that to you, to our staff, and to the community, we've put together a 12-minute video that's a generalization of what the strategic plan is. And when I say we've put it together, I mean Ben has put it together, and with great help from Deanna as well. But what we really wanted to show here was just in general what the strategic plan is. We wanted to put a video together so that everybody hears the same words. And then if anybody wants to dig deeper, they'll be able to get into the document itself or talk to the people on the video about what our strategic plan is. So we have a 12-minute video put together by our community relations folks. So Ben, if you would start that, I'd appreciate it.
Just like a good book, every good plan should have a beginning, middle, and an end. While it is true that our work to improve student achievement never really ends, progress can and should be measured with new chapters or initiatives. As these ideas and improvements are developed and implemented, the storyline continues. The Sioux Falls School District's story and future can be told in its strategic plan. This plan began with the design phase in the fall of 2015 and moved into the implementation phase in early 2016. The district's strategic plan includes 4 priority areas: student outcomes, school climate and culture, staff, and community engagement. The plan serves as a comprehensive framework for improving these and other areas so the district can deliver on its mission of educating and preparing each student to succeed in a changing world.
I feel very good about where we're at. I think we have some very clearly stated goals.
The Sioux Falls School District has long been a mission-driven and goal-driven organization. This plan is an ongoing investment in students and staff. While the work will take us through the next 5 years, some work is already underway, with many more initiatives slated for the future.
Strategic plan gives us that opportunity for every person in the community or anybody that wants to get on our website and see is going to know where we're at and where we're headed. And that's what this does is really guide our effort and guide our work.
In the area of student outcomes, realizing that sooner is better, the district took the leap to support students with the greatest needs by offering Summer Climb at 3 elementary schools during the summer of 2016. Nearly 200 students from Hayward, Hawthorne, and Laura B. Anderson Elementaries spent 8 weeks in the classroom, extending their focus on math and reading skills at a crucial time when they may have otherwise experienced summer slide. Instead, these students were engaged in deliberate lessons and activities to stimulate their brains and keep them excited about learning. More students will benefit this summer.
We're going to increase enrollment to 30 students per class. We were shooting for 25 students per class last year. We've upped that to 30, and so we'll have even more kids involved.
The MAP test, or Measure of Academic Progress, was the pre- and post-test used to track those students' progress. That tool continues to be in the pilot phase.
It's unique in that it is a computer adaptive test, so when a student sits down to take the test, it starts out assuming, okay, if you're a second grader, this is what you should know. Kid gets a couple of questions wrong, it realizes, oh, that's not really where you're at, and it starts to shift down. That helps us really understand where kids are with their learning.
The immediate feedback informs instruction. That means teachers can identify skill deficit areas and deliver what each student needs sooner. All fifth grade students are being assessed this year with the MAP in the areas of math, reading, and science. Any further use at the elementary schools will be considered as part of the FY18 budget. Graduation rates are getting a closer look too, and not just by the high schools. All grade levels realize their role in a student's successful completion.
When we talk about graduation and graduation rates, we're also talking about something that's really important to our community, and that's workforce development.
Principals, counselors, and teachers at the high schools are identifying students at risk of not graduating and meeting with those students one-on-one. This concerted effort looks different at each high school, but the goal is the same: to increase the number of students who can proudly walk across the stage and say they earned their diploma.
I really believe that that individual approach, those weekly meetings in each of our high schools, will manifest itself in improved graduation rates without lowering the expectations that we have for credit completion.
In the area of school climate and culture, we can't teach if students aren't there to learn. Attendance is one of the focus areas in this section of the strategic plan. A public service campaign was launched, and consistent messaging appears throughout schools and in written and video communications to increase awareness of the importance of school attendance. A study committee is meeting to better understand the root causes of attendance challenges.
What can we do to intervene for a student who is having attendance problems? So that committee is looking at researched, evidence-based practices to increase individual students' attendance, and we're putting it into a pyramid of tiers so that schools, parents, and students can work together to put together a plan that will support an individual student in whatever the root cause of their individual attendance issue is.
A tiered plan specific to elementary, middle, and high school levels was developed, recognizing that the reasons for absence at these levels differs greatly.
We have to be able to get to know each student, and we have to figure out what their individual situation and circumstances is that's creating a barrier for them.
Discussions are underway with community partners to address chronically truant students, including but not limited to medical providers, mental health professionals, law enforcement, state's attorney's office, and the court system. We all want to work together to improve student attendance. At our elementary schools, supports were needed for students struggling with behavior challenges.
Just as students have deficits in learning to read or in learning to write, so there are students who have deficits in understanding how to socially relate and regulate themselves.
The Tier 2 pilot began in August of 2014 at Annie Sullivan and Terry Redland elementary schools. The objective is direct instruction in a safe school environment for students who need support developing social and emotional skills, such as how to de-escalate behaviors. In the fall of 2016, Tier 2 rooms were added at 4 elementary schools: Hawthorne, Hayward, Cleveland, and Garfield, due to increased amounts and severity of behaviors. In addition, behavior facilitators were added at 6 elementary Tier 2 programs to assist and support consistent interventions for students.
Those schools have done the Boys Town Well-Managed Classroom training as a whole staff. They've all done crisis prevention intervention training in those Tier 2 rooms.
In the area of creating a more culturally diverse workforce, the district is working with the University of South Dakota to provide staff development that builds the capacity for greater acceptance and understanding of students and staff from backgrounds that differ from our own.
It does stimulate your thoughts to think about who you are and your background, and how does that background relate to all of the diversity we have in our district.
Further, USD has committed to helping the Sioux Falls School District design a pipeline program to introduce teaching as a profession to diverse students so we can systemically encourage students to consider the rewards of a career in education.
So we've gone out to some of the schools and met with individual groups of students at each one of the schools and talked to them about education and outstanding kids that are, a lot of them in accelerated classes, AP classes, things like that, are doing great things, but they definitely have an interest in teaching. So we're going to continue to foster that.
This initiative aims at having our teaching staff be more reflective of the students we serve, and it is an investment in our increasingly diverse K-12 enrollment and the greater community.
We're working with some individuals from the University of South Dakota who have piloted some of these classes and programs in other states, and so they're going to work with us to potentially do that. But right now, on the beginning phases, it's just to get out and talk to those students and then have continual meetings and then track them through college so that we can encourage them to come back to the Sioux Falls School District and be teachers here in areas that we have need.
Continuing in the priority area of district staff, comments and conversations during focus groups held in the spring of 2016 had the district evaluating the requirements of the K-5 elementary teachers' instructional day. Staff indicated concern for a lack of lesson planning time and more initiatives that add to the daily to-do list.
What are some of the concerns? What are things that we can do better?
Additional feedback was solicited during a series of focus groups in December, with recommendations still to come.
You hear a lot of new things that you just wouldn't have thought of otherwise unless you had asked.
In that same vein, more focus groups are scheduled for 2017, and this leads us to our fourth priority area of community engagement. Goals in this area focus on developing a shared responsibility for student success, shared between staff, parents, and the community. In this area, it's all about connecting with the stakeholders we serve and operating transparently.
We are the Sioux Falls Public Schools. We exist because Sioux Falls exists. And so really our goal in community engagement is to make sure that we are serving the community that we are hired and paid to serve.
Real concern is still a few years away, but Superintendent Maher has begun to plant the seeds in our community about growing enrollments. This fall, he told staff at the general session and supporters at the Education Foundation breakfast that existing space in our schools will not be sufficient. While this fact does not necessarily mean a new school is on the horizon, it does require the district to analyze current classroom usage and determine if educational delivery will result in more or less space in the future.
After we listen and after we meet, we always have to determine what's actionable. What action can we take based on that voice that we've just listened to?
Students, staff, and parents were surveyed on their preferences for the school calendar, and the surveying will not stop on that topic. There is still much work to do, so in order for the strategic plan to be successful, all stakeholders will have an opportunity to provide feedback and input.
And that's really what we're after here, is being responsive to the community that we serve, not losing sight of the fact that we do serve, and then using that information to take action so that our kids benefit and our community benefits.
This is the future of the Sioux Falls Public Schools. We need all of Sioux Falls to help us write these chapters and carry out these initiatives so our story gets better and better every year.
Again, thanks to Ben and Deanne and their crew for putting this together. And again, our goal for this is to make sure that folks understand what we're trying to accomplish through the use of a strategic plan. We'll have all of our principals show their staffs this, so every staff member in the district will have an opportunity to see this. So from a big picture, they'll know just what we're up to down here at IPC, but actually what our vision is for the school district. And then it'll also be on our website if anybody would want to see it there, and it'll run on K-Learn as well. So we think from a big picture perspective, we have a commercial, albeit a lengthy commercial, but a commercial for anybody that wants to see it there. And then if anybody wants to dig in it deeper, we have the document, and the finished document we'll have very quickly here. So that's the update on the strategic plan.
Great, well done. Any questions? We have a motion to acknowledge the final strategic plan and progress being made in each of the 4 priority areas.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? Just excited about that. It looks great, and I think it's a good piece for us to have out. Keep the transparency going and make sure everybody's aware of where we're at. So nicely done.
Thank you.
Ben, nicely done. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Great, thank you.
Well, one of the things that you saw in the strategic plan is community engagement, and one of the pieces you saw under community engagement is that of the calendar. And one of the things that we have done in the development of a calendar is try to get as many voices in the room as we can get in the room to listen to our community. And then we're trying to balance really 2 goals in putting together a calendar. One is to put together a calendar that makes academic sense, and 2 is to put together a calendar that makes sense for our community. Sounds pretty easy, but as you all know, that calendars can be an emotional topic. One of the things that we're really trying to do is to bring all the voices in, listen, take those voices down to a smaller pool that represents our community, a committee we've put together, and then ultimately that calendar will come to this board. So we're still a little bit away from the end game, and I hope maybe I'm not stealing your thunder, Mr. Nold, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Nold, who really has led this project for us and has done a real nice job. So, Mr. Nold.
Thank you. And first, I'll clarify, I've only worn this shirt twice, once for that video and tonight. So just wanted to make sure you knew that. Purpose of the
Didn't
report.
even notice, but now that
Did
you
you?
brought it up.
Oh, I noticed.
For those that did, I just wanted to clarify. First of all, the purpose of the report tonight, as Dr. Meyer had said, is to update the school board on the progress of the calendar adoption process for the 2018-19 calendar, and it correlates well with our community engagement priority area that we had stated. As we've gone through the work throughout the last couple months here, we have tried to, in multiple different ways, and will continue to engage individuals from our community. And so I'll go through the information on this report, answer questions in and of there, but I'll start out first of all with the meeting dates. We had started with the review to the school board, just on the dates that we were going to go through and utilize in that process, that outline. To date so far, we have completed the survey. I'll update you on that survey information here shortly. And we have gone through and met as a group a couple different times now to talk about some of that information, to talk about some of the possibilities that could come out and through for the calendar, and still have in the next upcoming days, tomorrow night at Lincoln High School, a community input session. Because one thing we'd heard from the survey was there still needs to be an opportunity for input from our community. So tomorrow night is one of those opportunities at Lincoln High School at 5:30 p.m. It will not be in the library just due to space potentially. It'll be held in the Commons, but we'll have signs up there. Instead of confusing anyone and sending out another update, we decided we'd wait till there. And then also at Memorial Middle School, the following night, January 25th at 5:30 in the auditorium there. So those will be 2 community input sessions where people are invited to come in and give us feedback as well on some of the different topics and things. There's also been several emails and dialogues that have happened throughout this time that I'll share some of those things as well as we go through. The calendar committee itself is made up of 25 individuals, and we tried to get a good cross-representation of different people throughout our school district, staff, also parents and principals representing each one of those. So you can see the 25 individuals that are represent of our community and our schools that are on that calendar committee. Turning to the part of percent, or 40.5% of the parents that we sent this out to responded to the survey with the information. All the groups, we asked 2 questions. The 2 questions were, first of all, when do you prefer the school year to start? The committee is considering the following options: 1, after Labor Day, and 2, before Labor Day. And then there's a second question. Regardless of how they answered the first one, just so we'd have their feedback on that, please choose between the following options in the event that the first question ends in the majority choosing to start before Labor Day. And that really, the part of that goes into that second question is starting how far before Labor Day. So what was coming clear to us that it would be a start before the Labor Day weekend, how far before should we start? And so we looked at a few of those different options on there, and I'll share some of that survey information with you now. First of all, in the parent portion of that, 44% of the parents had opted, 44.1% of the parents had opted to start after Labor Day that were surveyed, that responded to the survey, and 55.9% had responded to start prior to Labor Day. All those individuals still had a chance then to respond to that second question being how far before? So 6 to 8 days, possibly. Looking at that 6 to 8 days would mean that we would return after that December break and probably complete the semester then. There's 31% that responded in favor of that of our parents. A second question there being starting 10 days prior to Labor Day, but never prior to August 20th of any given year. And 67% of the parents have responded that they'd prefer to have that so that the first semester ended prior to that December break. And so that was the parent response portion to the survey. The student response portion of that, there was about almost just under 3,000 students that had responded to the survey. 35.6% of the students responded to start after Labor Day. 64.4% of the students responded to start before Labor Day. Now the students, when I respond to that piece of it, it would be our middle school students and high school students. When we talked with the committee, we looked at those two groups as giving a response back from. And so there was just under 2,905 students responded from our middle school and high school ranks. In the second question of that, our middle school students and high school students responded. 23.8% of them had asked to start 6 to 8 days prior to Labor Day. Again, that would be the purpose of coming back then after that December break and finishing up the semester within about 9 days after. So it ended up being within 2 weeks after we come back from that December break. 23.8% wish to have that type of an option if we started before Labor Day. And 75.7% had requested that we start 10 days prior so that that first semester could end before the December break. So that was the results of the student portion of that. The staff survey, there was 2,088 staff that responded. And the staff response, again, went in that same manner where they had opted at 33% to start after Labor Day, 66.7% responded to start prior to Labor Day. This is the one group that it was closest in that second question. In the second question, 46.8% of the staff said to start 6 to 8 days prior to Labor Day and then come back after that December break to finish up the first semester. And 52.7% had opted to start at least 10 days prior but never before the 20th so that the first semester would end prior to that December break. So as you look through those three, each of the three groups had opted to start prior to Labor Day. Each of the three groups had a larger percent that had opted to start enough days prior so that the break would, semester would end prior to that December break. But the staff one was by far the closest of those three groups that were surveyed. Keeping in mind that we still have more input to go on that with the input from our community input sessions the next 2 nights. You can see on there as well just a color-coded breakdown in a bar graph of that information that's tabulated there at the bottom. So that just put all those pieces of information in one survey graph there as well. I'll go into a couple other things here, and then I'll explain 3 different calendars that are set out there that people will be able to review and make responses to. First of all, the starting date references. In a look at this, each one of the discussions that we have had is some type of a compromise between those two based on some of that survey information we've had back. We may still not have the final calendar we would be looking at. I'm sure that'll be some type of a augmentation of all those calendars put together and what would be the best for our Sioux Falls School District, especially after we hear from these input sessions the next couple nights. Some of the things we looked at on there, though, just so the committee could have some reference points, the previous current calendar, so going from August 2006 to August 2014, the average start date was August 19th. The range was going from anywhere from August 16th to August 22nd. And then if you look at the Labor Day start dates, which would occur for these 3 days, or 3 years, September 2016 to September 2026, if we were looking all the way out using an after Labor Day start, the average start date would be September 5th, and the range would go anywhere from September 2nd to September 8th. Going down there are the next 3 types of topics that we had. So if we did look at it, that we started on the second to last Monday in August, that range would go anywhere from the 18th to the 24th. That was not one of the survey questions we had. The next one down would be one of those survey questions, starting 10 school days prior to Labor Day, but never before the 20th of August, looking at from August 2018 all the way to August 2027. The average there would be August 22nd as a start date, and the range would go anywhere from that August 20th to August 24th. And then the final one there, if we're starting 2 Wednesday prior, so that there was a short week in that first week, the average would be August 23rd, and that range would go anywhere from the 20th to August 26th. So we're looking at a lot of different things in there of what would work best for our district. As we look at those things, you can't get every single request into one of those. And I'll kind of show you on a couple parts of the calendar when we look at that coming up here shortly. Some of the considerations we talked about, semester tests. That obviously will impact the high school. And that's where we'd see a predominance of that. When you looked at the staff one, how close that was, the predominance of that will come from the high school level, wanting to end that semester, the semester test before that break in December. Where you go through the middle schools and down to the elementaries, they have probably less of a desire that way. Both groups of which was fairly dominant on starting prior to Labor Day, but where we end that first semester and how far before Labor Day was definitely a difference of opinion in there. AP exams and courses, so we take that into consideration. That's one of the things we're definitely heard over the time is how does that AP exam become impacted? By how many days or weeks are remaining on the calendar after the AP exams are completed. That impacts them because they will have, if it's a semester course or even a year-long course, they'll have fewer days for the study for that AP exam prior to taking that AP exam. Compromise start date, we obviously are looking at that, and every one of the ranges that we looked at above is some type of a compromise from the original date. Obviously, some of those dates were overlap a little bit when you look at the range, but each one of those on the average was a compromise from the original. So really trying to look at that. How can we look at something that will be a compromise between those two things? Shorter week at the start of the school year. That was definitely a request coming from our elementaries. The graduation date, where that lands, and then balanced semesters. First semester could be a little bit shorter as we talk through each one of the different groups because of the state mandated testing. Eats up a few of those days into the second semester. So we can definitely take that into consideration to an extent. It can't be so imbalanced that it doesn't make sense on the calendar. The guidelines, I will not go through all those. Our state bases it on the state requirements for minutes. We do have more than enough minutes for each one of our levels that we continue to keep track of and implement through there. On this one page there, on the next page, page 5, I did at the bottom there show an actual day count for the 16-17 calendar because people do become confused in that in times because there's rules or laws in there that the state does allow us to use in-service time, does allow us to use parent-teacher conference time, things like that to be able to come up with that 176-day calendar that we have. And so that's just listed out there for people's reference. I will at this time go into the 3 different calendars that'll be shown during the input sessions tomorrow. In each of those, keep in mind, it is not that we are going to decide on, is it going to be draft number 1, draft number 2, or draft number 3. These are just examples. Matter of fact, since we've been starting this discussion, there's been quite a bit that has come through on why not starting on alternate days or different days. So middle school and elementary, can it start at a different start time than the high school? Each of those 2 groups have different needs. So I think as we've gone through this, there's been a lot of conversation on what are some things that we can do that makes the most sense for everyone. Will that happen? I don't know. The same way I don't know if any one of these calendars will be one of the final solutions. Starting on that first calendar, if you look on that calendar, the first one that's a draft, the start day on that, and please keep in mind the days in between make very little difference. The committee has not discussed those yet. Once we finally get the start date and the end date, then we're going to go back through and start to figure out those days in between. So for any of these calendars, the days in between do not matter at this point in time. The start date for that first one is if we did start on that 20th, because that was one of the things we looked at, to get enough days into that, or before Labor Day, to be able to end the first semester prior to that December break. So if you see there, it would start on August 20th, goes all the way through, and the first semester would end December 20th. Now, one other thing we've discussed a little bit is with that 21st date in December, that could buy a day back into that first semester if that teacher work day was on a different day. And we've been in discussions about that, of where that could maybe be placed so that that could be an actual school day. So in a model like this, starting on August 20th, going all the way through to December 20th or 21st being the first semester, it does leave a fairly balanced count of days for the first semester and the second semester. The first semester in this would have somewhere between 85, 86 days. The second semester would have somewhere around that 88, 89 days. And again, we could probably go up to 3 or 4 days difference in that quite easily to make up for those state mandated tests that we take that take up time during the school year in the second semester. So this is one of the options that we look at. This fulfills a few things. It ends the first semester before that December break. It helps as far as the AP exams, because at the end of the year, you look at May 15th being the final day of the school year, and the AP exams would be finishing it up about that same time. It does start about 10 days prior to the Labor Day, so it's the least of the compromises in that area as far as days. It fits a few of the other things. It does not necessarily work in reaching part of the request of the elementary of starting later in that first week, so it's a shorter first week, and also some of those being indifferent as to when we end the first semester. The second calendar I'll go on to, draft number 2 that you can see. What we looked at there is if we start in the middle of that week, so that'd be on the Wednesday. This is starting school on the 22nd, which is a Wednesday. Ending that first semester still prior to that December break. Trying to fulfill a few different things of where it may be a shorter week for that first week for elementary. Trying to end that first semester prior to the December break for semester tests. If you look at the end of the school year would be on the 15th, which would again satisfy some of those things with the AP exams. But one of the difficulties in this type of a format, where we can't probably have the best of everything, is if you look at the first semester count of days, it ends up being about 83 days. The second semester would be about 91 days. So even looking at a calendar like this, just for the purpose of seeing how that would lay out, it just wouldn't make sense for a calendar to start in that midweek and still end before the December break. The offset of 83 days to 91 days would just be too significant for our semester tests, our semester classes, trying to complete those in an appropriate manner, putting that many days into the second semester compared to the first. So even though this is one we're laying out there, it would probably not be one that would make sense as an adopted calendar. The third that we're looking at is where we did start. This one would start on the 23rd, which would be on a Thursday of that school year, going in, and the first semester would then end, coming back approximately 2 weeks, not quite 2 weeks, 8, 9 days after that December break. So on this version of it, the 10th of January would be the end of the first semester. The teacher workday would be on the 11th. Then if you look at the end of the year would be on the 21st. Some good things about this: it does start later in that week, gives a shorter week. It does not end before that December break. It comes in back for 2 weeks' time there, coming back after the break, so semester tests would be after the break. The AP exam at the end of the year would be after, or would conclude at least a week prior to the school year. So you look at a few different things in there. We've tried to incorporate some of the different pieces that have been asked. This one does, the third one, balance out well with this semester. 87 days in the first semester, which it currently is, and 87 days in that second semester. So as I said, as we go through and start to look at some of these different options, you start to put some of it on paper. A few of the things we look at, like that second calendar, may not even be an option. We may not be able to do something like that because it's just not feasible. The third one could be. The first one could be. Or could there be some type of a combination of those two that would work? Some of the other things, as I said, that have come up as discussion points is, do we have the two start at the same time? We'll continue to listen to some of that input. Some of those things have been sent to me in emails and in verbal conversations. But as we go through the next 2 nights here and listen to some of that community input to see what they say and some different ideas that they may have. There are things that maybe weren't thought of earlier that could be consideration. I anticipate that there will be many other ideas that we will hear over those next 2 nights. The committee participation, you can obviously see ahead, and then the summary. The Sioux Falls School District is committed to creating a school year calendar that is established through the collaborative efforts of our stakeholders. The calendar committee has worked to gather input in a variety of ways to ensure the calendar recommendation to the school board has been created with numerous points of view and interest being considered. The previous update is a representation of that work. Questions?
I just wanted to point out 2 more things on the third calendar that we talked about as well. We had gotten some feedback from people saying that one of the reasons they like to start after Labor Day is because people like to maybe get their last vacation or whatever in. And so you'll notice that Friday before Labor Day is also a no school day. So there's actually 2 short weeks at the beginning of the school year for people, just again to ease kids back into school or for the early learners for elementary school. And then at the end of the school year, one of the things that I think got mixed reviews on is that graduation would actually occur then on Memorial Day weekend, which we've done in the past. I think I graduated on Memorial Day weekend, so it's not unheard of. But again, for some people, that's not their preference. And so I imagine we'll get some feedback on that as well. But I just wanted to point those 2 things out on that calendar.
Absolutely. Great points. And our elementaries were very fond of that, having the 2 short weeks, and it actually ended up being the 3 because the first week and then 2 4-day weeks going through there. But that's why we put that date in there on the 31st so that it would provide for that 4-day weekend. And I imagine between each of these, or what may come up as a final compromise, is to be very considerate of that Labor Day weekend and the vacation that individuals may make prior to it heading into the full steam of the school year. But great point on those things as well. Absolutely. That was a conversation piece of it, so it wasn't just by chance.
Any other questions? Great job on the committee, and so thankful for the transparency. We'll see what the next 2 nights bring from the group. May I please have a motion to acknowledge the progress of the calendar committee's work?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Just really appreciate the thoroughness of the report, Jamie. I know you put a lot of work into it and really helped spell things out, in my opinion. So thank you.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you, Jamie.
Our next report is the second quarter finance report from Todd Veek.
Thank you, Dr. Maher. This report takes us up through the end of December, obviously halfway through the fiscal year. But as far as our spending patterns, about 40% of the way through the year. So we don't have a ton of info to go on yet. We do know that in the general fund, well, in both the general fund and the special ed fund, a great deal of the revenue is based on state aid. So we kind of knew what that was as soon as our fall enrollment got locked in. We're thinking both of those revenue sources are going to come into the good slightly, not anything substantial. One outstanding item out there still is the bank franchise tax, which is a fairly, as far as other funds go, it's a fairly significant part of our revenue sources. So we will we'll see how that plays out. On the expenditure side, in both areas, we think we're going to come in under expended slightly at least. So 40% of the way through the year as far as our actual expenditure patterns go. We do think we will come in under budget. As how much that will be, we don't know, but I wouldn't think it would be much, maybe in the $1 million range is what we're looking at. Brief report, we'll get more detailed as we go out through the budget and get more data into the system. I'd stand by for any questions.
Any questions for Todd? Can I have a motion to approve the second quarter financial report?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Final report is a legislative update. I'll just do it from here. The session has started rather slowly, so I'm guessing we'll have a much lengthier report as we go through the bills for the first time as they come in and get the board's approval on the positions we've proposed. This one is probably one of the thinnest ones we've done the first time out, so I'll go through it hopefully rather quickly. First three bills, House Bill 1016 through House Bill 1018, come in from the South Dakota retirement system. They are all part of a package of bills to tighten future benefits in an effort to ensure that the system is fully funded going forward. It's been, I've been here 15 years, and it's basically been a 15-year process where benefits have been tightened, and even 1 year our contribution was increased 20%. So this isn't anything new. We are suggesting no position on all three of those bills. If you go to page 2, just as we've done this in the past, just if it's okay with you, President Tolke, just stop me if you want to do further clarification on any of these bills.
Thank you.
House Bill 1021 revises the current payment process for students placed by their parents in a psychiatric residential treatment or intensive residential treatment facility. We recommend supporting the bill. It takes the district out of the middle where we collect state aid and we pay tuition, and then half of the money is paid directly to the facility from a different department. So this would take school districts out of receiving the state aid. They just wouldn't get the state aid for the student. So we think that's a good idea. We recommend supporting the bill. Page 3, House Bill 1022. It repeals education service agencies from the statutes. We suggest taking no position on the bill. House Bill 1052 prohibits public employers from retaliating against an employee who makes a report to an appropriate authority of a violation or abuse of a law or rule. We suggest no position. We have retaliation provisions throughout our policies as well. That is the end of the House bills. Senate bill, on to page 4 then. Senate Bill 7 attempts to revise the criteria for determining if property is classified as agricultural land for property tax versus, we obviously don't have a lot of we have very little amount of agricultural property in our district, so we suggest no position on that bill. House Bill 27 prohibits certain direct conflicts of interest. I'm sorry, Senate Bill 27 prohibits certain direct conflicts of interest by public officials and provides a penalty. Public officials include board members, officers, fiscal agents, don't like that, and employees, well, among others. So it's quite broad. The public official may only use the powers and resources of public office to advance the public interest and not to obtain any personal benefit or pursue any private interests. We recommend opposing the bill. School board members, school officials, officers, fiscal agents, and employees are already subject to various conflict of interest provisions. There are several statutes cited there. In addition, Sioux Falls School District, like other public employers, has its own conflict of interest policies. these laws and internal policies sufficiently address conflicts of interest. So we have a position of oppose. We do not have it as a key bill. I don't know if there's any thoughts on what we might make it a key or not, but right now we say no. Senate Bill, onto Senate Bill 30. It updates language regarding the GED test. It's generally a fairly harmless bill. We suggest supporting the bill. Senate Bill 33 amends the state aid formula to increase the target teacher salary amount by 1%. So the governor said that in his his budget address, 1% increase, and does the Cutler-Gabriel amendment. And Senate Bill 35 does it for the general ed formula. We suggest supporting both those bills. Senate Bill 55 appears to allow teachers to teach multiple perspectives on scientific topics that have become controversial, for example, climate change, human evolution, etc. The district is proposing to oppose the bill. The Sioux Falls School District policy already supports teachers addressing controversial topics in an objective atmosphere. Again, we do not have any key bills here yet, so we oppose a couple, but we don't list them as key. That's it for now. I would stand by for any questions. So would my colleagues over there who wrote several of these.
Are there any questions or comments or changes that you feel are appropriate? Hearing none, I'd like a motion to acknowledge the pending legislation by the Sioux Falls School District.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
I move that we go into executive session per South Dakota Codified Law 1-25-24.